Well, they are originals. They're the first printing from the original 18th century plates. So they are original plates. The wonderful thing about Banks Florilegium is it's never been printed or published before. We're completing what Joseph Banks wanted to do and failed to do in the 18th century.
That's right, which is incredible, really, because it took such a long time.
Well, it certainly did. I thought it was going to take 6 years. And in fact, in the end, it took 10 years to do.
Was it the longest project you ever did?
It certainly was. It absolutely took over my life, but it was wonderful. I mean, Captain Cook became my travel agent. I traveled around the world in his footsteps, or rather in the wake of the Endeavour. And it was a wonderful experience. And I met wonderful people and saw wonderful things, including the State Library of Tasmania in Hobart.
Really? So you came to Hobart?
Certainly did. I came out in 1981, the big botanical congress in Sydney. Yes. And I gave a talk at the Mitchell Library there. And actually, I came out with Edward Egerton Williams, who was my master printer, who was the real hero of Banks Florilegium, because he did all the printing. He's a genius man. And after that, we traveled all around Australia and to Tasmania, visiting libraries and universities and people. It was quite an act of faith for people who signed up, because we published in 2 parts at a time. You know, the complete collection is 35 parts. And what we did was we asked people to put down a deposit for the first part. And then we delivered them 2 parts and they paid for 2 parts. So we were always 1 part ahead, because we had no idea how to finance this thing. It was a major punt to do the whole thing.
Yes. And so no wonder our catalogue record unusually says 1984 till 1989 for publishing.
Yes, right.
And so they did arrive in 2 lots, 2 of the Solander boxes at a time.
That's right, yes.
And what made you decide to do them in these Solander cases, Joe?
We did it because the museum wanted to have the individual plates readily available. And if we had bound them up together, it would be much more difficult to look at. That was one reason. The other reason was we actually needed to finance the whole very, very ambitious project as it went along. And if we'd waited to bind them all up, we'd have never been able to do it. Oh. We're a very small firm. I mean, we're just a little independent publishing house. We'd spent 20 years publishing contemporary art by living artists, painters and sculptors. And we got into historical things really rather by mistake. I did a big project with the Tate Gallery, publishing some wonderful topographical prints, William Daniel's Voyage around Great Britain. And then by all sorts of happenstance, we suddenly got the opportunity to print and publish Banks Florilegium. And that really was a big project. And actually it effectively stopped us doing any contemporary work. I just found my brain wasn't big enough to take in 2 centuries at once. And I had to absolutely concentrate on Banks Florilegium.
And were you involved with the Royal College of Art's black print, ink printing when they did that?
That's when we first saw them, actually, in 1963, when we just started editions of Alecto. And you know the story, I'm sure. William Stern, Dr. Stern, at the Natural History Museum, took some of the plates down to the Royal College of Art just to see whether it was possible to print them. And our studios were quite near the college. And actually we were working with artists who either just left or teaching there. So and my first etching printer actually became the print technician in the printing department at the Royal College of Art. So we saw these wonderful plates and we were absolutely bowled over by them, not just by the quality of the plates, but the whole romance of this amazing record of this extraordinary voyage, unpublished. And very impertinently, we formed up to the director and said, we'd like to publish them. And quite rightly and reasonably, we were told to go away and mind our own business. And then, as you know, the Royal College of Art, eventually, it took them 10 years, published an extremely elegant book of 30 plates in black, and misnamed, by the way, Captain Cook's Florilegium. And it was only 17 years later, when I was in the Natural History Museum researching a completely different project, that one of the curators there in the botany department, Dr. Chris Humphreys, who eventually became our botanical editor, said, you know, have you ever thought of publishing Banks' Florilegium? And there they were in the bottom of a cupboard in the botany library, all still wrapped up in their 18th century paper and unplugged, about a ton of wonderful copper. And so we started off on that.
That's amazing. And Joe, you had to chromium plate these copper plates.
Well, it works because copper is a relatively soft metal. And although the Florilegium plates are absolutely wonderful, they're double beaten copper. They're the very best quality of copper.
Oh.
But when you're printing, I'm sure you know all this, when you're printing from a copper plate, particularly the technique we use, it's called printing à la poupe, where you work all the individual colors into the plate. You use quite a lot of pressure. And the danger is that if you run an edition, even as small as we did, of 116, you risk wearing away this very fine engraving. The real quality of the Banks Florilegium plates is they're so precise. I mean, Banks was a sort of high technologist of the 18th century, and he was absolutely determined to make an edition where even if they were printed in black, every botanical detail would come out. And we therefore needed to preserve the plates. And the way you preserve the plates is by electroplating them. And actually for our modern prints, we used to do it in steel. And we found that actually wasn't strong enough for doing this. So we chrome plated them. To electroplating, it's a minutely thin layer of chrome. But what it means is it doesn't affect the line at all. What it means is if you do by any chance wear through the chrome, you'll see the gold of the copper showing through, and you would stop at once and redo it. It never happened, actually. The chrome absolutely stood up all the time.
And did the chrome stay on the plates then when they were returned?
They're now in our chrome overcoats back in the British Museum, yes.
Yes, and Joe, I love the way that you sort of had a contract with the British Museum to say that another publishing wouldn't be done until 2040. Well,
Right, yeah.
we're rushing towards 2040. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think it's absolutely inconceivable anyone would do it, actually, nor would they need to, actually, now, because the reproduction techniques are now so amazing. If anybody wanted to do it, they could take our original prints and reproduce them. But, of course, they don't get the fact that these are original works of art. And the wonderful thing, you've seen them, the plates, is they have this wonderful bite from the pressure of the paper going through the press. So they have a sort of three-dimensional quality. Well, I hope they enjoy it, and to thank them for giving me the opportunity of going to Tasmania. I was knocked out by it. I thought it was a wonderful, wonderful island.